On today's show, how can we expect DeAndre Hunter to be used by the Cavs? What are my initial impressions after he met with the media for the first time? And how are the Cavaliers trending over the last 10 games? We'll talk about all that and so much more on this Monday edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Again, that's $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins with FanDuel. DeAndre Hunter is slated to make his team debut tonight as the Cleveland Cavaliers take on the Minnesota Timberwolves at home. Of course, Hunter has not yet played for the Cavs. He was acquired via trade last Thursday, did not play in Friday night's game in Washington against the Wizards, but should play tonight, Monday, if you are listening to this or watching it the day it comes out, but should play tonight against Minnesota at home. He did meet with the media yesterday for the first time since the trade and just have some thoughts, plus kind of want to get into how I think he's going to be used. And I do have some lineups that I'm very interested in seeing. So we'll talk about that for the first two segments. And then, of course, get into the trends for the Cavs over the last 10 games and for the season, plus a pretty shocking number or a pretty shocking stat, I guess would probably be a better way to term it, that I've found that we'll talk about in segment number 3. But Hunter's first meeting with the media, I thought went well. He came across as a very likable guy, as somebody who was here and excited to be here, excited to win. He brought up winning several times in his answers during the 10 or so minutes that he met with the media on Sunday. And that is something that does seem like a priority for him. Of course, his relationship with Ty Jerome was asked about and was talked about pretty frequently, but there were some basketball things that were brought up that I find interesting. And the first thing I found interesting is he was asked, and I don't remember who asked the question, but he was asked whether or not he views himself as a small forward or a power forward. And that's something that I do think there is some difference between, but he answered it kind of the way I expected him to, where he just said he's a basketball player. He doesn't view himself as a 3, doesn't view himself as a 4. I think that we're going to see him a lot at both places. I think there are lineups where it's going to make sense for him to play small forward. Maybe it's in that starting group. Now, I would not necessarily expect him to be in the starting lineup tonight for his first game. I just don't know if that makes a ton of sense for him to be thrown into the fire against a good team in the starting lineup, especially when he's had one practice. The team didn't do much, to my understanding, on Saturday after their game against Washington. So he's really had one full day around this group. I don't think it's fair to expect him to start and play like 30 minutes in a game so soon after the trade. I do think maybe after the All-Star break, that looks different. Kenny Atkinson was asked about whether or not DeAndre Hunter is going to be in the starting lineup, and he said, we'll see. Haven't necessarily made a decision as far as that goes, which is fine, because I do think that and I know that so many people want him to instantly come in and be the starter, but I think there's a solid case for him to not be the starter. I think there's a really solid case for him to be the starter. One of the things that I asked him during his availability is, where is he more comfortable? Does he have a preference? And he spent the most of his career, he has spent as a starter in Atlanta. Now, this year, he only started 4 games, a few of which came after Jalen Johnson hurt his shoulder and was ruled out for the year. So he was kind of moved into that starting lineup near the end of his time in Atlanta. But he's been somebody who has had success in both areas. He's having the best year of his career this year, and that has primarily been coming off of the bench. So I do think that there's a case to be made both ways. And it's not as if the lineups with Max Strus around the core 4 haven't been really good, because they have, and I'll get into that coming up in segment number 2. But I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer as far as starting goes, because I also think we get a little carried away with starting lineups. It's not always about who starts. It's so often more about who finishes, right? Like a lot of times over the last couple of years, The Cavs' best lineups have had Karis LeVert in them, but Karis LeVert has not been a starter for the last couple of years. He's been in that 6-man role, and I just think that the starting lineup can be a little bit overrated when you start talking about what lineups work, what lineups don't, but we will get into that a little bit more coming up. And I think that one of the things that I'm very interested to see with DeAndre Hunter is defense, because I think that it's fair to say he was brought in to this team to help them in certain matchups. Primarily, I think the matchup against Boston. Now, there's no guarantee they're going to make the conference finals and see Boston. There's no guarantee Boston makes the conference finals. This is an NBA world where anything can happen. I would bet money on the Cavs and Celtics matching up in the Eastern Conference Finals if both teams are healthy as the season has gone along. I think they are very clearly the two best teams in the Eastern Conference. But I also think that, there's a chance that they end up facing other teams. And it's not as if DeAndre Hunter was only brought in to face the Boston Celtics. He was, of course, brought in to help this team, to make this team better. And I think defense is the area where they would really like him to help bring some improvement for the Cavs. Because if you look at how they've been, they haven't necessarily reached their defensive potential this year. They've been good, not great. They're 8th in the NBA in defense for the year. That's not necessarily where we would expect a roster that's filled with so many good defenders to be. So I do think that that's the area where we can see him help make a difference. He's going to be somebody that can come in, can defend wings, can play good team defense. And I do think that there are some things that are worth monitoring if they change about Hunter's game defensively, because if you look at what he did in Atlanta, he's a solid individual defender. He's not a defensive player of the year caliber guy, but he's a solid individual defender. And the one knock on him, and I think a big reason why he's not necessarily loved by analytics defensively, is that he's not somebody that causes a ton of havoc. He doesn't create a lot of steals. He doesn't have a lot of blocks to his name. For his career, he averages 1 steal plus block, or stock, as the cool kids call it in the NBA, 1 per game. So he hasn't necessarily done a ton of that. But I also do think, and this is something that Kenny Atkinson touched on, I also do think that with playing alongside one, there are going to be times, of course, where we see him with both Evan Mobley and Jared Allen on the floor. And it would be very surprising if he plays minutes without either of those guys on the floor. I guess there are some lineups with Dean Wade at center, maybe we see those a little bit more with DeAndre Hunter on the floor. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily expect that. But for the most part, he's going to play the vast majority of his minutes alongside a really, really good interior defender in either Mobley or Allen. So I do think that that is something that could help to make Hunter a little bit more aggressive, because if you look at some of the rim defenders that he's played with in Atlanta, none of those guys are anywhere near the caliber of player in terms of defending the rim that Evan Mobley and Jared Allen have been. So maybe we see him be a little bit more aggressive, take a few more risks on defense, because he's going to know that now, compared to Atlanta, the help he has behind him is much, much different in the best way possible. One of the other things that I'm very interested to see is how long does it take him to get up to speed? Like, this is going to be a process. And I will caution everybody, don't expect him to necessarily look great tonight in his first game back. These things take time, especially when you're going to a new situation where a team already has it, for the most part, figured out. And that is I guess a benefit to DeAndre Hunter. He's not being asked to come into Cleveland and be a savior for this team. They're already really good. They're one of, they are the second best team in basketball by record, by net rating. A lot of metrics say that this is already a championship caliber team. So if he's not asked to come in and be the savior, he's asked to come in and fit in. Maybe that's easier than being the savior, but I also think it is something that you just can't expect him to instantly fit in day one. Now, maybe he goes out tonight and has a great game. I don't know. It's certainly possible, but I think that overall this is going to be a process. And I do think that getting this deal done, I should say, of course, getting it done before the All-Star break, because the trade deadline is before the All-Star break, but having this time with the break coming up for him to acclimate himself, not only to the Cavs on the floor, but to Cleveland, I think is a really good thing. Having the trade deadline just before the All-Star break could be really beneficial for him, because you do have to remember DeAndre Hunter is a human being. Like, he's not just an athlete. He is also a human being. Like, he has a life in Atlanta that he needs to move to Cleveland. So having a week off to be able to do that could be a big help. And there's going to be a lot going on in his life as he adjusts from Atlanta to Cleveland. So I do think that having 2 games before the All-Star break, getting to play 2 games with this team will be good. And then getting to kind of recalibrate, get some time on the practice floor, get to know the area, get to know the organization. I think all of that will be a really good thing. And then we could see a better version of him after the All-Star break. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of role he has tonight in the game against Minnesota. It'll be interesting to see how he looks on Wednesday against the Toronto Raptors. And then after the All-Star break, when things start to ramp back up, then that's when we could maybe see a more unleashed version of DeAndre Hunter. Kenny Atkinson, I asked him, what's this acclimation process look like, not only for him as a player, but for you as a coach? And, he said that for a player, he thinks it'll probably take 3 or 4 games before DeAndre Hunter really feels comfortable with his teammates, doing what he's asked to be doing, the offensive system, the defensive system, all that stuff. Completely fair. Well, 4 games for the Cavs. They play tonight, they play Wednesday, and then they're off for a week. They play next Thursday in Brooklyn. They play next Friday at home against New York. So there's a really long time before he hits that 4-game mark. And then he mentioned for him as a coach, like, to feel comfort and trust and just kind of really feel like he knows the player, it's about 15 games. That is half of the remaining games for the Cavs. And he brought up the example of Max Strus, where Max missed so much time because of that ankle injury, where he didn't play until the middle of December, that Kenny didn't necessarily feel great about everything until a month later or so. And I just think that this is going to take time. It's not going to necessarily click right away, and it's okay, because the Cavs have a pretty significant cushion for the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They've asserted themselves as a championship level team. And if they don't necessarily look great in February and March, it's not a big deal. This is a move about looking great in May and potentially June. Now, what lineups could make DeAndre Hunter look the best? What am I curious to see him? Well, let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Skims. Yeah, we're going to talk about my underwear, the underwear that I'm wearing right now, because it's the best underwear that I've ever worn. Skims Men's makes men's underwear. Yeah, they do. And it's absolutely fantastic. You should give it a try like I did, because, hey, you might be skeptical. You might be listening to me right now and go, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I do, because I've worn a lot of different underwear brands in my life, and this is the best one. And I was skeptical too. Thought, really, they're making underwear for men? I thought that was a company for women. No, it is for you guys. Trust me. It's the best underwear that I've ever worn. And I've had issues in the past, when it would scrunch up, when it would just be uncomfortable. Skims doesn't do that. It's so much better. It is a life-changing experience, really, if I do say so. So what you need to do is you need to go shop Skims Men's at skims.com and in Skims stores. That's skims.com, skims.com, and let them know that we sent you. So after you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Plus, if you're looking for the perfect gift for your Valentine or for yourself, treat yourself right now. Why not? Skims just launched their best Valentine's shop ever, available in sizes for women, men, kids, even pets. Give your pet the gift of Skims this Valentine's Day season. Of course, again, shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That is skims.com. And of course, in Skims stores. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Cavs newsletter. So how are the Cavs going to use DeAndre Hunter? Now, of course, we will not know this for sure until we see DeAndre Hunter on the floor with the Cleveland Cavaliers. That is going to happen tonight. I don't know to what extent. I don't know how many minutes he'll play. I don't know what his assignments will be. I don't know if this could just be, hey, go get your feet wet type of thing, because it's not fair to expect him to be up to speed and know the entire offensive system, know the entire defensive system. Like, part of this is with 1 day of practice, just kind of rolling the ball out and going to play basketball. And like I said in the first segment, it's okay to not necessarily look the greatest in the first appearance with the team, because there is a level of comfort that just isn't going to be there yet. It's not fair to expect it to be, but it will get there at some point. So I don't know what lineups we're going to see him in tonight. And I would not anticipate him being in the starting lineup tonight. Not saying it won't happen, but I would be surprised if it does happen. So the first group, of course, as I say that I'm interested to see DeAndre Hunter with is the rest of the core four. That's Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. I want to see him alongside those four guys because that group with Karis LeVert, who is a much different player than DeAndre Hunter, but that group was plus 22.9 this season per one. That was their net rating. So per 100 possessions, they played 166 possessions together. So it was a really, really good group. It has been historically a really, really good group for the Cavs. Karis LeVert has been part of some of the best lineups that Cleveland has had. Now, Hunter, of course, is a much different player than LeVert. He doesn't bring as much on-ball creation. I think that shooting-wise, he's a bit of a different shooter. Karis is having a great season. I think DeAndre Hunter is probably a little bit of a better shooter. Defensively, I think the assignments that DeAndre Hunter can take on are something that certainly is different, and it's different in a good way because I think he's more suited to defend some of the stronger perimeter players in the NBA. So that same core four group with Max Strus, and this is why I get the whole starting lineup thing, but I also think, hey, they're really good with Max Strus. So this season with Max Strus, with the rest of the starters, so the current starting five has played 190 possessions together, which is not a gigantic sample size. But in per 100 possessions, plus 26.3 points. Like that group is destroying teams. So it's really, really good. Now, can the Hunter addition be better than the lineup with LeVert? Maybe. I don't know. I'm interested to see. That same lineup with Dean Wade played 420 possessions together-ish in that ballpark. That's a significant sample. They're plus 5.1 there. So I think that the argument to have Dean Wade in the starting lineup is probably the least of the three. If you're going to look at who do you want to start, and granted, that is a bigger sample size. Dean Wade has seen some better teams. Those things tend to even out. So I won't say that it's been bad, but it hasn't been as good as the other ones. So I do think that having the starting lineup with DeAndre Hunter will be interesting to see. I don't know how successful it's going to be. I think it could help to highlight Hunter as a defender. I think that he should be a better defender than Max Strus. I don't know if he's going to be as good offensively. I think he's different offensively because Max utilizes so much more off-ball movement. DeAndre Hunter certainly more of an off-ball screener type of player than a movement type of player. So that's just going to be a little bit of a different tweak for the lineups to deal with, but it'll be an interesting thing to see. The other lineups I'm really, really interested in. What does he look like on the floor when Evan Mobley is at center? Because the Cavs have been really good when Evan Mobley plays center this year. They are plus 13 per 100 possessions when Evan Mobley plays center. And it's a pretty big sample size too. It's not just, he's played 150 possessions at center this year. How come that's not necessarily working right? No, he's played a ton at center this season because almost all the minutes that Jared Allen's not playing center, Evan Mobley is. So he's plus 13.8 points per 100 possessions in 1,400 possessions. So that is very sustainable. It's a big sample size. That said, the three most common Evan Mobley lineups at center all featured Georges Niang. Now, Hunter is a different player than Georges Niang. He's much more athletic. He can defend better, but he could slide into that role too. He can be the four in some lineups with Evan Mobley at center. I think that would be really interesting. Do we get a Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, maybe Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill, DeAndre Hunter, so you're a little small in the backcourt, but you're good in the front court. What does that lineup look like? What does the lineup maybe look like where you could go? I think that this addition gives Kenny Atkinson so much roster flexibility now that they didn't necessarily have before. If you want to play small, you could go with those three guards, maybe Hunter at the 4, Mobley at the 5. A lineup that I would love to see. I don't know if they're going to go to it, but I would love to see it. You could go as far as playing DeAndre Hunter at the 2. Now, you'd be oversized. I think that there are some opponents that could give you problems, certainly. But what if it's a Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell playing point guard? DeAndre Hunter, Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. Who is scoring on that lineup? That is just length everywhere. That is one of the best defensive groups that I think the Cavs can put together. Or there was the one lineup that I very much wanted to see more of, and we really didn't get a chance to because Karis LeVert and Max Strus didn't spend a ton of time being healthy at the same time this year. But both starting guards, so Darius and Donovan, Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley. I think that could be a really, really good lineup. Or even the two guards, Hunter at the 3, Dean Wade at the 4, Mobley at the 5, or Allen at the 5. I think that those are lineups that Kenny Atkinson is going to be able to go to. Kobe Altman on Friday mentioned giving Kenny Atkinson all the tools necessary in the toolbox to go out and maximize this team. I think that the roster flexibility, the lineup flexibility, I probably should say, I think that is something that has been expanded dramatically by this move. Sounds crazy because they traded 2 guys for 1 guy, but I think that there's so many more lineups they can tap into now because of the positional flexibility that DeAndre Hunter brings that they just didn't have before. And that is something that I do think should be looked at as a really, really exciting thing. Now, the Cavs have been playing some solid basketball lately. We'll talk about what they've been doing offensively, defensively, and I have a stat. Boy, do I have a stat that I want to throw your way next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action, well, it's just getting started. There's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or, maybe you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, I don't know, you can stay in on the action, though. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine those live bets into a same-game parlay. FanDuel's live betting features the chance to keep every moment more. Keep every moment exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, you never feel like you miss your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. So, it's time for trends. I didn't get a chance to do this last week just because of the schedule, because of some travel on my end, because of the trade deadline. Like I normally like to do this early in the week, and I did not get the chance last week, but I'm going to make it up to you today because I have a stat that's going to be pretty telling about who the Cavs are. So for the season, entering play on Monday, the Cavs have the #1 offense in the NBA. They're scoring 121.7 points per 100 possessions. That is 2.1 points per 100 possessions better than the New York Knicks, who are in second place. It's a pretty sizable gap. Like the Cavs offense is the elite of the elite. They are incredible on that end. They've been first almost all year. If you pull almost any sample size, months, weeks, like they are just consistently at the top of the NBA. I also pulled the previous 10 games. The Cavs offense in the last 10 games, which they're 6-4, they have an offensive rating of 124.3. So for as good as they've been during the season, even when they're not necessarily winning, and that speaks to the importance of defense and why they made the DeAndre Hunter trade, but even when they're not necessarily winning, like their offense is still lighting teams up. And that includes some games against some really good defenses. Like in that stretch, you've got both games against Houston. The Rockets are really, really good defense in the NBA. Detroit, solid defensively. Boston, solid defensively. Like this has been, and even Atlanta had been playing really good defense before the Cavs dropped 137 on them. So this has been something that you look at, okay, this is legit. Like they're doing this against good teams. They're not just beating up on the bad teams. I mean, that said, when they see the bad teams, like that game Friday in Washington, didn't feel like the Cavs played great, and they still scored 134 points in that game because its offense, it's an absolute juggernaut. So defensively, they're back up to 8th. So they are top 10 in both offense and defense, which is a good place to be. Defensive rating of 111.7. Not necessarily great, but it could be worse. For their net rating, they're second in the NBA behind Oklahoma City, which is to be expected with how good OKC is on defense. For the last 10 games, The Cavs on defense are 15th. Defensive rating of 114.7. That is mostly because of the losses to Philadelphia and Houston, particularly that second Houston loss where they just absolutely got destroyed on defense. So if you go to the last 7 games, which eliminates those 2, really those 3, even though the first Houston game wasn't a bad defensive game. The last 7 games, the Cavs defensive rating is 109. That's 5th in the NBA in that span. So they've been playing better defense lately. The last 10 numbers dragged down by the games a few weeks back, like towards the end of it. So if they play good defense tonight against Minnesota and against Toronto on Wednesday, the next time I do this next week, we'll be talking about a defense that is in the top 5 for the last 10 games because it's been really, really good through that span. So here's that stat that I wanted to bring up. So through this point in the season, the Cavs are 42-10. They've played 52 games. They've won 42 of them. They have been incredible, as you would imagine. They are, this is via StatMuse. They have the 12th best net rating ever in the NBA. StatMuse has them at plus 10.3. I don't know where their offensive and defensive ratings come from, but StatMuse has them a little bit different than the NBA.com stats, and these stats can kind of vary, like who filters out garbage time. I don't know where StatMuse pulls their stats from, but they have the number 12 net rating of all time. This is the highest net rating a Cavs team has ever had. The next highest was the 08-09 team that won 66 games. Oklahoma City had the second best net rating of all time. That's how good the Thunder are this year. Now, history tells you if you finish in the top 10, you win the title. There's a chance that the Cavs and the Thunder both finish in the top 10 this year. Like, that is not something that is outside the realm of possibility. And obviously, only one team can win the title, and who knows? Maybe it's not OKC or the Cavs. I don't know. But what I do know is that of the teams, and I'm pulling OKC out, pulling the Cavs out, like they don't count because this has not been a full season from them yet. We've not seen them have a full season at this point. So let's remove them from the equation. So the top 10, the 10 completed seasons with the best net rating in NBA history, 8 of them won the title that year. The 2 that did not win the title actually happened in the same season. It was the 2015-16 season because the Cavs did not have one of the 10 best net ratings that year. They were not a historically great regular season team. They were a historically great postseason team, not a historically great regular season team. The Golden State Warriors in 2015-16 finished with 73 wins. They had a net rating of plus 10.7, which is something the Cavs can pass this year. Like, that's not a crazy thing if the Cavs finished with a better net rating than the team that won more regular season games than anyone ever. They are 9th amongst teams that have finished a full season in NBA history. The San Antonio Spurs that same year had a better net rating than the Warriors did. They were plus 11.3 according to StatMuse per 100 possessions that year. They didn't make it to the conference finals because they lost to OKC in the second round, and then OKC, of course, blew a 3-1 lead against the Warriors, who then blew a 3-1 lead against the Cavs. So you had 2 teams that year that had 2 of the 10 best ever regular seasons and didn't win the title. That's how rare it is that it's happened. There's been 1 year where a team has finished in the top 10 in net rating and not won the title, and it happened to be 2 teams in that same year. Now, could that repeat itself this year? Sure, but history tells you that with the Cavs being as good as they are, like they're not just a really good team, they are a historically good team because of how good this offense is. Their net rating is an elite company. They are a championship caliber team. And I guess the only problem for them is, one, the Boston Celtics are really good, even if they're not a championship level net rating, like historic level net rating right now. And OKC is incredible. Like, OKC is one of the best teams ever as far as regular season stuff goes. Now, all of this is decided in the playoffs, and we don't know what things are going to look like when the postseason arrives, but I do know that this Cavs team is really, really good, and every single thing points to it. They should get better with DeAndre Hunter. So if you like today's episode, do me a favor, especially if you're new here. A lot of new people with the DeAndre Hunter acquisition. So if you're new here, do me a favor. Whatever app you're listening on, whether it's Spotify, Apple, anywhere else, hit that subscribe button for me. Make sure you're subscribed. I don't want you to miss tomorrow's episode and all the episodes after that. Give me a 5-star rating. Don't give me 4 stars. Give me 5 stars. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking about DeAndre Hunter's debut and the Wolves game.